if you are going to teach me to be a good artist in 3 minutes.
In 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, see as much art as you can in real life. Connect with other people. Like, even if you have to put on your own shows, do it yourself. DIY is like a really big thing. Go to as many openings and things as you can while also making your work. So balance those two things, but try to go to as many openings and go by yourself. Don't go with, I mean, you can bring your baby, but don't bring your friend or your husband or someone you're going to talk to. Just like go and meet as many people as you can outside of your own. Don't like, because sometimes people go with like a buddy,
and don't.
But then you end up talking. Yeah, and don't try to meet somebody, even if it's like the drunk guy who was only there for the beer. Just like try to meet someone at every opening that you go to, and then set yourself up with a schedule. Work. Like try to get as far with your work as you can, whether that's 10 hours a week, whether that's 20 hours a week. Put yourself on a schedule and commit to it and be disciplined, and you will get somewhere, you know. But being an artist is doing things on a lot of different levels, you know, from social to like the studio. So does that sound like, is that okay?
Really solid.
大概10年前的一天，漫无目的在网上冲浪的我，瞥见了一幅画，抹去了身份的女性身体，在我们的注视中被分割，进而消费。在我看来，这关乎整个艺术史中图像发展历程，以及在美的规训当中对于女性的物化。我以为她是我的盟友，但随着我更深入去了解了 Gina Beavers 的作品之后，我意识到 Gina 的野心并不止于此。她想要评论的是这样一个线上世界的权力系统，从它鳞次栉比、出于炫耀与展示目的而出现的美食。她用这种充盈溢满了画布的富饶，尖锐地指出我们被异化的努力与徒劳，到那一个个争相以关注与热度为新的锚定的肢体，以自己的身体面庞为画布，在笔触的雕刻润色中被塑造成理想中的自我。他们被算法罗列、推送或压缩，在网络世界里，像素成了新的货币。未能获得关注与青睐的图像，从对身体主人的纪实，沦为了一个模糊而缺斤少两的印象。那是一个个被线上的繁荣刻意遮蔽与预期偏离的自我。而在最新的作品中，镜头拉近，各种织物画布偷走了罗斯科纯然抽象将观者卷入画中的野心。这是社交媒体投喂给瑟缩在被无限压缩的个人空间中的我们，那经过反复设计后营造出精致而理念化的家。而当 Gina 巧妙地还原出毛巾毛毯的质感，试图用画布来营造出一个温暖家居空间里的氛围时，开幕上回荡的谈笑声却将我们拉回到了画廊冷硬空旷的展厅里。在一次采访中，当采访者问到他的作品是否是对线上世界虚荣的一种批判时，艺术家回答，这仅仅是对于当下的忠实记录。但那么多的颜料、笔触、反复描摹，记录本身便是对存在的价值认同。正如 Gina 的个展标题神圣的消费者，眼前这个世界也正是我们亲手创造出的产物。正如人类文明如何架构在一个个抽象人造的概念上，却让我们得以拥有高效的写作方式，得以超越现实的人际关系，与素未谋面的人拥有一致的价值认同。而这些看似虚荣的景观背后，是在不断被物化异化过程中，即便被扭曲挫败，却也从未放弃过希望与努力，向着某种理想前进的自我。在他的个展开幕后，我给我的盟友发去了一封邮件。于是一个下着小雨的周一上午，在工作室楼下停好车，从皮卡上跳下来的 Gina 见到了这个扛着大包小包从纽约赶来的人。但他不知道，从10年前的某天起，他已经领着我在我一厢情愿的结盟中走了好远。
I'm wondering, how do you end up in arts?
Well, so my mom had an art history degree from UCLA, and so she was always taking me to museums, and she always had a studio in the home. She was always an art teacher when I was growing up. My parents moved a lot. My dad worked for the Foreign Service, so we would live overseas. When I decided I really loved math and science in high school, and I wanted to be a doctor when I went to college. Everybody was like, what? Like, that's weird because everybody in our family is very kind of not math science. So they were kind of shocked. And then I got to college and it turned out I could not compete with people that were very disciplined. And so I started looking at other subjects and I got very into anthropology. At the University of Virginia, they have a wonderful department. And also my mom was like, take an art class. So that was actually my first art class was in college, but my mom was always an art teacher. So I was always doing art at home as well. Having said all of that, they always supported my sister and I in whatever pursuits, but I don't think they really thought that it would end up where it did. Because my sister's into theater, so she was a working actress for a long time in New York, and now she teaches theater. So they always supported us in that way, for sure. But I just don't think that they ever thought it was, that it would be a full life thing. It was just maybe till we met a husband or something. I don't know.
Did you show your mom like your early works or?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a funny thing because we're a little bit, I mean, I don't want to say competitive, but I think it's like, my mom is constantly showing, she lives in Northern California and she's constantly putting her work in different venues and applying to different shows.
So cool.
Yeah, she's very,
So you were like fellow artists competing with each
yeah,
other.
a little bit. I mean, we've
so
never
cool.
been in the same, sphere, but she is very driven. She's really driven about the next thing or the next place she's going to show. I had a funny thing where I met with a curator last time I was in San Francisco, and my mom had a card for her show that she gave to the curator. So she's just, yeah. And sometimes we'll get into like arguments about certain artists that she thinks are not good enough or serious enough, and I happen to admire that. So Jeff Koons would be like a sticking point between us. Where I respect a lot of his work, and my mom is just like, nah.
I think your visual language is so authentic and so unique. When I was going through all of these online interviews or artist talks, I read that right before all of these, you actually did hard edge abstraction. So how did you find your visual language step by step?
It's been such a meandering path. I think I went into grad school. I mean, that's probably the best place to start because that's sort of the first time I had a body of work to apply for something. I went into grad school with kind of very influenced by outsider comics of the time, like Chris Ware and Twisted Sisters. These are things you can go, Julie Doucet. So that's kind of where I started. If you look back at what you were doing before you had the influence of all of the teachers and it's like, what was I interested in before I had that influence? And it was very comics. And then by the end of grad school, I had really moved into abstraction, but it was kind of this pop abstraction, super graphics, from the 70s and spray paint and fluorescence. So it was influenced by abstraction, but it was still kind of a product or a advertising. It had a relationship to that. At the time, it sounds so weird, but Old Navy had just sort of jumped onto the scene in the late 90s and then had these really splashy kind of super graphic. And it was sort of the beginning of Photoshop and design in this very particular way. And I was really influenced by the aesthetics of all of that. So by the time I left grad school, that's kind of what I was doing. And then I started to get more and more into using tape and making these very hard-edged. So, and then at a certain point that I went to a sample sale for T-shirts in downtown New York somewhere. Zoo York, I think, was the brand. And they were racks, thousands and thousands of T-shirts, all with these very graphic, abstract designs. This is probably 2007, 2008, something like that. And I was just all of these are as good as my hard edge abstract paintings, all these T-shirts. So why am I making them so hard edge? Why am I making something that a screen print can make? What is, and that's when I started to experiment with acrylic and making things a little more handmade and I started to open up a little bit more in terms of my materials and the way that I was making them. That was a big defining moment where I was just why am I doing this?
At that moment, you were more conscious about what's the unique points for painting, and especially for your painting.
Yes. And sort of the futility of it. Like, why am I bothering to make these things
Using all
look
of
like
these
they're made by a
masking
machine?
tapes.
Yeah. When you could just make something on a machine, it's fine. Like, it doesn't, am I trying to say something? It's like the technology caught up with the way that I was making paintings and made them kind of, I don't think I was that wedded to some idea about, futility and obsessiveness. Although I do think there is an obsessiveness that continues through my work in different forms, like a kind of over finishing, or now I'm doing these like plaids, a lot of stripes and like repetitive. So that is a part of my process, but I just shifted it at that point. I was like, then I had Art Guerra was in my studio building. He started bringing me lots of acrylic, and that's when I started to really experiment with the acrylic and building it and cutting it and using it in all these different ways that led to, more of the work that people know.
So those like different acrylic mediums, ultralight or anything, they became like the body of an image.
Yeah, I mean, I experimented with them a lot, and then I started working in this way where I was thinking it would be fun to like build a body, a physical, form, and then paint something opposite. So the first one that I made like that was like based on Demi Moore Vanity Fair cover from the 90s, where she's nude but she has a suit painted over her. And so I love that idea of like, I'm building it up for one thing, but then I'm painting something separate on the surface. Then I started to like not be so attached to that. And I was like, I could just build things up and also make them photorealistic. I started to look at food photography. This was like now, as soon as like 2010 and Instagram and all of this comes around, all these food photos on my phone, people are taking, of their meals to kind of show off or, so then I started building the acrylic and painting it to look really like the thing, like a kind of hyper real version of it, of a photograph. So and that process going from sort of abstraction to like realism was really about photography and seeing so much more photography like on my phone and that going from like the world around me into the world like in my phone.
So when I was looking at all of those chicken and waffle, fries, like burgers, whether like it's burger by itself, In-N-Out burger, or like a burger in a vagina.
Yes. I think I started to over time. So from burger vagina was like 2020. Burger by itself is probably 6 years earlier. So by the time I get to like 2020, I'm starting to remix a lot of my earlier ideas into these kinds of mashups or paintings that have all different layers of narrative in them. And originally they were just appropriated from other people's feeds. And then I started to like combine elements. Also because I would go looking for images and they wouldn't exist. So like hot dog nails or something like that. It wouldn't exist online, and I would want to make it if it existed, but it doesn't. So then I have to make my own version of it. So that's sort of how the process of making like burger vagina, it's like once you start searching and creating your own, all these things start to mash up against each other. Your previous ideas, like, famous works of art, all these things kind of go into the stew. And that's how the work started to shift at that point. Yeah. Again, my work is always shifting. I don't know.
Did you just like first apply the makeup on yourself?
So I started by just appropriating images that I found, like just searching makeup tutorials or how to do a smoky eye or how to do a fuller lip or a red lip, so I would use a lot of appropriated images. The tricky thing with that is that the photography, sometimes it's high resolution, sometimes it's not, so that affects the painting. The work starts to look not necessarily like it's made by the same person because the photos I'm appropriating are from different people. The same thing with the memes where I would have an idea for like a Van Gogh Starry Night lip or something and I couldn't find it. So, or certain ones where I would paint them myself on me. So by the end, I was kind of making my own lip tutorials or painting things and then creating collages in Photoshop because I just couldn't find, a Jackson Pollock lip. Like that doesn't really exist. Although there is a lot of Jackson Pollock body painting because people love that idea of just splattering paint all over themselves. Like there's a lot of that, but there weren't any like tiny lips. I have a whole like makeup set and which just added a whole other element of the self. Since I'm looking at social media so much, the idea that I would use myself made sense because it's all about the self.
When I was in my early 20s, at that time I thought that it was like useless gesture of applying makeup just to project perfect version of you.
Yeah.
Or like people like doing Photoshop on their own selfies. I thought that was useless back then. But recent years, I realized that what is like reality and what is virtual has blurred and merged with each other. So I think that part of yourself is actually your true self in a sense.
No, it's true. That's a really good point. And I think the idea of makeup, the fact that the Kardashians, so many of them have makeup line, or at least one of the Kardashians has a makeup line. All of the contouring that they do, that they taught about and stuff, because their lives were so filmed, it was like, well, we're going to be on film constantly. We might as well have, we have to have full makeup all the time. It's like this. Like once I saw these lights, I was like, oh shit, did I put enough makeup on? But like think of that. You wake up in the morning and you have the cameras. Then it's like, well, I'm going to have camera makeup on for my whole life because my whole life is filmed, So there's something in there like what you're saying about like, but yeah, for sure, this blurring of these two lives, like the online, these two coming together more and more.
That same thinking actually pushes me to think deeper into your art, especially when you said earlier in another interview that you were doing a documentation of the online landscape.
Yeah, I have this kind of perspective of looking at culture, I think because of my anthropology studies. Like I keep looking at it from the outside, but I'm also obviously on the inside. I mean, I have my own social media. So it's kind of this weird back and forth between kind of noticing things and then
So which side are you spying for?
I know.
Are you spying for the inside or?
I know. I'm like, am I an inside? I mean, what am I? Yeah, it's a weird thing. And I think also maybe some of my looking at the culture of it, I feel for some truly native social media users like Gen Z and younger people, that some of my work could be off-putting in a way because it's almost as though I'm not making fun of, but I'm commenting on it. And it's like, why? Why comment on it? Like, it is the air we breathe, It's like, I don't know. I feel like it could be less appealing to some audiences because it looks more like it's a comment on it rather than just being it, Why not just be an influencer, Gina? Just do that. Like, why are you wasting so much time? Like, but I'm very implicated in it. Early days, I was documenting everything, and it's funny to see how things have shifted over time, like the kinds of things. Like in the beginning, it was a lot more of like artists taking pictures of like piles of junk. This influences my art, like this kind of thing. And now that's not as, the algorithm doesn't like it as much. So it's like things have gotten more colorful and interesting and less like slice of life. And unless you're doing something fabulous, then it's like, definitely put that on there. If you had told me, like as somebody who was born in the 70s, that we would all be like, like showing off our lives like that, I would not. Because like the 90s, that was not the vibe. Like when I was in high school and college, it was all about like not being cheesy, not being like, hey, like that was not. So it's very funny to me to like see how many people, including myself, are just like, hi guys, like, because
just not catering to the gaze.
Yeah, now just completely turning around and showing off for the camera when we would have hated that in the 90s. We were too cool for all that. So much has changed. I was just talking to my friend about the idea that like, do we all have the same personality now? Because it seems like we can all talk so much more freely. We all have a lot more social skills than say, I can't speak for everybody, but in general, I think that the social media brings out the social aspect of people. And so we can communicate. But then sometimes I'm like, are we all just like one personality? We all have a fun, accessible personality now. Like, I don't know.
How like really believe in your theory about the economy.
I mean,
it makes people believe that all of these watching online presence, online ads, and everything is a process of researching on the products they're buying.
Right.
So buying the product become the final step.
yes.
And, like it feels like a goal achieved to them.
Yes. Yes. It's literally like retail therapy, the idea of going and shopping, but you used to like go to a store. But now it's a loop that's built into the platform itself where it's like, see someone doing better than me, feel terrible, go buy something. Or the other one is feel terrible and think, what's wrong with me? And then it's like, well, you might have ADHD, take this quiz and buy this like online therapy platform, or you might be OCD, or you might have one of these, you know, psychological issues. That's why you're not there at that point. So go buy. So it's always got something for you, whether it's like, oh, will a pillow satisfy this? Or do you need actual, like, to doubt who you are as a person completely and think that you've never been, you know, diagnosed with like a serious like psychological disorder, like, you know, but we have something for all of it. You know, the platform will give you whichever. So in some ways the ads themselves are kind of comforting, you know, that is an aspect of it, because it's also it's like a pair of pants with like a buy now. It's very basic. It's not tricky. It's not like everything else about the app is kind of tricky. Some things are getting posted that you don't know the motivation. Is this a political motivation trying to confuse me about like what's actually happening in Ukraine or something? You don't really know. It's like question mark, question mark. And then you get to the ad and it's like, oh, well, I know what it wants. It just wants me to buy it. I get that. I do that all the time. That's easy. Yeah, so innocent.
So pure.
You know?
I actually have the same feeling when I walked into your recent show. When I went into the space, I have feeling that I've been hypnosis.
Interesting.
Like with all of these lighting, giant gallery space and much bigger works, almost absorbed me into the painting. I think that is really mysterious.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, it's a big shift in terms of how I'm making them, because I'm not appropriating images. I'm actually, I mean, some of them are appropriated, but most of them are put together in Photoshop. So I'm making my own compositions, which is like a big shift. And they're more intuitive. So they're more like this flowing into that to this, you know, so it's a different feel. I think they're not narrative in the same way. And then the materials themselves, there is no like fleshiness or...
It definitely gives me the feeling of the marketed perfect home.
Oh yeah, well that's kind of what the show is about, is this kind of wanting stuff. And it's this very personal stuff maybe, because it's, you want to make the feeling of cozy. Like, do you ever watch these videos? I get so many videos of like home, but like this, I was watching one where this girl was putting on really thick socks and it was like, kept flashing to the window where it was raining, and she was putting on this like cozy sweater, and it's like that feeling of like, you know, wanting to feel it in the moment and just cozy. But it's like those times you rarely can ever feel those feelings when you want to feel them. You know what I mean? Like the idea of feeling cozy, you know, I'll just put all of this stuff around me and I'll feel so cozy. No, like coziness has to sneak up on you. It's like beauty. Like you can't just, you know what I mean? Like you can't just like force your way into coziness, you know? There's so much of that online. It's such a jarring feeling to watch these, and you think there are people out there that are now going to try to recreate this feeling. And all of that is so stressful and anxiety producing. Is the opposite of relaxing or cozy, or, you know, I don't know. It's a thing I've always struggled with, like draw up a beautiful bath and sit in it and relax. And it's like, I'm sitting in there and all I can think about is all the things I have to, you know,
Yeah.
or forcing myself to relax. No, relax. No, Gina, relax, relax. No, this is supposed to be relaxing, you know, like that kind of thing. Or even sitting on the beach and relaxing. Like, you know, sometimes you're not in a headspace to relax. You know, it's like it takes a long time to unwind, and, you know, you can't always.
I'm just curious, like why you decided to be an art educator focusing on teenagers rather than like college.
Right.
Or,
Yeah. Well, I think some of that is necessity. I think if there are so many people that want to be college professors who
Right.
have art degrees,
Right.
that it's so competitive that it's
Right.
almost impossible. Where teaching, like in a high needs school, like I did, much more. They need teachers, you know, much more accessible in terms of being able to do it. So it was less of a choice. I decided that I wanted to teach rather than like work in a gallery. I was too afraid that if I worked in a gallery, that I would get too jaded seeing the other side of things as I was getting started as an artist. So I didn't really want to do that. And then I didn't really have skills for like art installation or being an art handler. I couldn't really do anything. So it was really a process of like elimination. Like, what can I do?
Right.
Well, I can teach art, you know. So I went back to school for just a few classes in order to be able to like get certified to teach K-8. And it's also like a good salary. You get health insurance, you get the summer off, you're done at 3:00. There are perks to it, you know, for an artist's life. So for a long time, I leave this school at 3 something, go work until 7 or 8 or 9, you know, work after school for many hours, then work all weekend, doing both, you know, trying. But also New York is expensive. It's like, how are you going to pay your expensive rent and also your studio costs, you know? So it was a good job for what I needed. But it was also inspiring to see kids working, to see the drawings that they would leave at the end of the session, to see, you know, being among kids like making art is really inspiring. And I think I felt by the end of teaching middle school, like if I could do that, I could do anything, because it really cures you of your fear of failure. Like, I think I was much more afraid of failing as an artist when I started teaching. Like, oh, I'm scared to put my work out there. Oh, what if people don't like it? Oh, you know. And then you're a teacher and you fail every day as a teacher for years. Like, maybe you have one day a month where you have some like success, especially in the beginning as a New York City public school teacher, because they just throw you in there with very little experience and you're just kind of like, so after you fail that much, you just become unafraid of failing. You're just like
kind of immune to like failures.
Totally. The other thing was like leaving the school at the end of the day. I would go home, like I had a train ride, and I would forget everything that happened that day. Just leave it at school, like all the bad stuff, the kids that got into a fight or whatever. And then start over the next day, which is also a really good thing for an artist, to not hold on to too much negativity, or because there's a lot of rejection, or this doesn't work, or that doesn't work, or this person doesn't recognize you in an opening, or whatever it is. It's like, I can leave it. I'm not attached to it. I can just move on.
True.
You know, it's kind of a good thing to learn. It was painful to learn it, like through failing so badly for so long, but it was good. Yeah. 开艺术有开度